It is a Saturday evening in July. You step out onto the back patio with a glass of iced tea, and before you can sit down, you slap your forearm, then your neck, then you wave one away from your ear. You paid for a yard treatment 6 weeks ago, $80, and they told you it would last. Or maybe you bought the fogger can at the hardware store, $12, sprayed the whole yard Saturday morning, and by Saturday night you are slapping again. Either way, the money left your hand and the mosquitoes did not leave your yard. Now here is the part that ought to bother you. While you are out there swatting and spending, there is a 5-gallon bucket behind your shed with an inch of rainwater in it. There is a clogged gutter above the garage. There is a saucer under a flower pot you have not touched since May. And in that still water, right now, tonight, the next 100 mosquitoes are already hanging just under the surface, waiting to hatch. You have been paying to chase the adults out of the air while the nursery runs day and night, 10 feet from where you are sitting, $80 a visit, or $150 if you called the premium service, and most of them want to come back monthly. That is $300, $500, $900 a season. To fog the air above a breeding site nobody told you to look at. There is a way the old folks stopped this for pennies. Not a spray, not a gadget. A practice that goes back more than 100 years, exposed in public health records before the First World War, carried forward by Depression-era families who could not afford to let dead water breed pests on a working farm. And the only reason most people never learned it is that nobody makes a dime teaching you to walk your own yard and spend a few cents. There's a great deal of money in selling you the next fogger can. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what that method is, exactly how to do it, what it costs, which is almost nothing, and where not to use it. You will also know the one modern alternative that is genuinely safe for birds, pets, and honeybees, and when to reach for that instead. No gimmick, no selling, just the plain fix and the honest math. I want to be straight with you before I go any further. Most people fight mosquitoes the same way every summer. They buy the fogger can, or they call the service, or they grab the yard spray off the shelf, $80, $150, sometimes more, say, and they walk around the patio fogging the air at mosquitoes that are already flying. And the mosquitoes come right back. They come right back because the flying mosquito is the end of the problem. It is not the beginning. The beginning is a little puddle of still water behind your shed, or a clogged gutter, or a bucket you forgot, or a barrel that's been sitting there since April. That standing water is a nursery. Every few days, in warm weather, a new batch hatches out of it, and no amount of fogging the air stops the next batch from coming up behind the last one. Here is what I am going to walk you through. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how mosquito larvae breed in your own standing water, exactly how to stop them at the source for pennies, where not to use this method, and when a safer modern alternative makes more sense. I am not going to sell you anything. I am going to hand you an old practice that costs almost nothing and show you why it works. My name is Hal Perkins. I am 74 years old, raised in rural Missouri by parents who came up through the Depression and never wasted a thing in their lives. On a farm, you could not afford to let every barrel, trough edge, and broken container turn into a mosquito hatchery. My folks were not buying specialty mosquito systems. Nobody was. They were doing what careful people did. First, you drain what can be drained, cover what can be covered, and then you treat the dead water that has to stay put. My mother and father did not think in terms of integrated pest management, but they knew dead water makes mosquitoes, and they knew how to stop that cheaply. I share these things because somebody has to hand them on or they are gone. You are not learning some miracle internet trick. You are recovering an old public health habit the careful old folks knew, and I am going to be straight with you about where it still works and where it does not. Before I show you what to do, you need to understand why it works, because the plain reason tells you what to expect and what not to expect. Mosquito larvae are not little fish. They do not breathe underwater the way a minnow does. In most of the common species that breed in your yard, the ones biting you on the patio, the larvae come up to the surface of that still water and breathe through a little tube called a siphon. Think of it like a snorkel. They hang just under the surface, tail end up, and that siphon pokes through the skin of the water to reach air. The pupae, the next stage, right before they become the flying adult, do the same thing through a pair of what are called respiratory trumpets, little breathing horns at the surface. Here is why that matters. If you change the surface of that water, if you lay a thin film across it, an oil or a purpose-made surface agent, those larvae and pupae cannot get their breathing gear through to the air. They have to come up and put their little breathing tube through the skin of the water. If the top of the water stops behaving like open water, they cannot do that job. They suffocate. And here is the part most people do not know. The Centers for Disease Control lists oils and surface films as one of only a few methods that are effective against both larvae and pupae. Most other larvicides only handle the larvae. The surface film handles both stages because both stages depend on that same surface access to breathe. Now, set your expectations honestly. This does not kill mosquitoes already flying around your yard. It does not reach hidden breeding sites you have not found yet. It does not replace draining, covering, or changing water when those things are possible. It works only where mosquitoes are actually breeding in still water you can coat, and it is not instant. The World Health Organization's testing standards for larvicidal oils record mortality at 24 hours. So the honest promise is that by tomorrow the wrigglers should be dead or motionless. Not vapor-like, not instant. One day. That is a better promise anyway, because it is the true one. And one more thing about timing. Mosquito development is fast in warm weather. The University of Georgia notes that larval development can take as few as 5 to 6 days under ideal conditions, with pupation right after. The EPA tells homeowners to empty or change common water sources at least once a week. So we are working inside a tight window, and that means prevention cadence matters. I will come back to that. If this is the kind of plain money-saving old way teaching you want more of, the kind that keeps real dollars in your pocket instead of sending them down the store aisle, subscribe. I put one of these out regularly, and every one of them is built the same way. The honest reason it works, the exact way to do it, and the real figures. That is all I do here. Now let me walk you through the fix step by step, and I want to be careful with you because the internet is full of bad advice on this one. The first thing you need to understand is that the oil is not the first move. The first move is always to dump, drain, cover, or change the water. That is what every extension office, every county health department, and the CDC itself will tell you. Walk your property. Any container holding still water, a bucket, a pot, an old tire, a wheelbarrow, a tarp that caught rain. If you can dump it out, dump it out. If you can turn it upside down, turn it upside down. If you can cover it so rain does not collect, cover it. If it is a bird bath or a pet dish, change the water. Do all of that first. The oil belongs in the narrower category, standing water that you truly cannot dump, drain, cover, or change. A clogged gutter you cannot fully regrade tonight. An abandoned fountain. A rain barrel you are not drawing drinking water from. Catchment pockets in concrete or landscape features. Dead, puddled water in places where elimination is just not practical right now. That is where this method lives. Write that down. Here is what you need. A bottle of clean vegetable oil if you are keeping the historical household angle, and that is how my folks did it with what was on hand, or preferably a purpose-made light larvicidal oil if you want the best current label alignment. A small squeeze bottle or an eyedropper for controlled application, a flashlight to inspect the water for wrigglers, and a stick or a twig to move floating debris out of the way. That is the whole kit. Put this on the pad. A 48-ounce bottle of budget vegetable oil, great value, store brand, whatever is cheapest, runs about $4.12 at Walmart. That bottle contains far more than most households will ever need for this, because the amount per treatment is tiny. If you want the safer modern comparison item, and I am going to tell you in a minute when you should use it instead, a 6-pack of Mosquito dunks, those are BTI, a biological larvicide, runs about $9.87 at Home Depot. Against either of those, homeowner mosquito control service commonly runs $80 to $150 per professional visit, and most services recommend multiple visits per season. The arithmetic tells itself. Step 1. Inspect before you treat. Go out with your flashlight tonight if you can. Look at any standing water on your property. What you are looking for are wrigglers, the larvae. They are small, dark, and they move in a jerky, twitching motion just below the surface. If you see them, you have confirmed the breeding site. If you do not see them, the water may not have been standing long enough, or it may not be a breeding site. Confirm before you treat, and while you are out there, handle the easy wins first. Empty what can be emptied, turn containers over, clear the gutters if you can get to them safely. Only then do you move to treating the stubborn dead water. Step 2. This is the biggest place internet versions of this method go wrong, so listen carefully. You are treating surface area, not depth, not gallons. The old principle is a film across the top of the water. Current larvicidal oil labels are written by square footage of water surface, not by volume. One label gives an average rate of roughly 2 to 4 teaspoons per 100 square feet of water surface. For most household containers, a bucket, a barrel, a puddle, and a landscape pocket, 100 square feet is enormous compared to what you are dealing with. That means the right instruction is not pour in a tablespoon. It is use only enough to leave a continuous sheen. For a 5-gallon bucket, that might be a quarter teaspoon. For a rain barrel, maybe half a teaspoon. You are looking for a thin, unbroken film across the surface, not a glug of oil sitting on top like salad dressing. Write that down on the pad. A film, not a glug. Surface area, not depth. Step 3. Apply at the edge, not from above. The University of Missouri Extension says light oils can be applied to the upwind side or the shallow margin so that air currents and natural spreading carry the film across the whole surface. Here is what that looks like. Take your squeeze bottle. Put a small amount of oil onto the water right at one edge. Watch it spread. The oil will naturally move across the surface. Stop as soon as you see a complete unbroken sheen. If there is floating debris, leaves, sticks, grass clippings that breaks the surface into islands, clear the debris first. Every gap in that film is a breathing hole. The larvae will find it. A continuous sheen is the whole point. Step 4. Check the site the next day. Remember, the honest expectation from WHO testing is mortality at 24 hours. By tomorrow, the wrigglers should be dead or motionless at the bottom. If rain has fallen overnight and broken the sheen, or if wind or fresh debris disrupted it, reapply lightly. Same method, same tiny amount, just enough to restore the film. And if the site keeps refilling from a leak, a blocked downspout, or poor grading, understand this. The real fix is still repair and drainage, not endless retreatment. The oil buys you time. The permanent answer is to stop the water from collecting. Now let me say something plain about what not to do, because there is a lot of bad advice on this one. Do not use used crankcase oil. The University of Missouri Extension explicitly warns against it. Used motor oil contains heavy metals, combustion byproducts, and contaminants you do not want in your soil or your groundwater. Do not use gasoline, diesel, or any improvised petroleum product that is reckless and dangerous. Do not use this method in pet bowls, livestock water, bird baths, or any water you intend animals to drink from. The CDC's homeowner larvicide guidance says to treat water that will not be used for drinking. That is a plain line, and you should respect it. Do not use it in wildlife bathing water. Oil on feathers can mat them, strip their natural waterproofing, and create buoyancy and temperature problems for birds. If you have ever seen what an oil spill does to a duck, you understand the principle. A bird bath is not the place for this. Do not use it in fish ponds or waters with aquatic life you care about. Petroleum-based mosquito oil labels warn of hazards to fish and aquatic organisms. And do not keep buying adult foggers while the breeding site stays wet behind the shed. That is the most common bad advice of all, not from the internet, but from the habit. People will spend $80, $100, $150 per service visit chasing adults through the air. And the whole time, there is a bucket or a gutter or a dead fountain producing the next wave 10 feet from the back door. Stop the nursery. That is the fix. Here is where the honest modern alternative comes in, and I think this is stronger than the oil for certain spots. If you, want a treatment for bird baths, for water features near pets and pollinators, BTI is the better recommendation. BTI is Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, a naturally occurring soil bacterium. The EPA says it can be used around homes in bird baths and similar standing water. Studies indicate it has minimal toxicity to honeybees. It does not pose a risk to humans when used correctly. A single mosquito dunk, which is compressed BTI, treats up to 100 square feet of water surface for 30 days. 6 of them cost about $9.87. That is your safe around birds, safe around pets, safe around bees option. Use it where wildlife compatibility matters. Use the old oil film method for dead, non-drinking, stagnant water that truly cannot be dumped. The gutter, the abandoned fountain, the rainwater catchment nobody is drinking from. Let me tell you where this practice comes from, because the history is honest and it matters. The oil film method is not something invented in the Great Depression. It is older than that. Public Health Reports was describing oiling water surfaces as an anti-mosquito measure in 1915, explaining that larvae cannot penetrate the oil film with their breathing tube and drown, and that mosquitoes will not lay eggs on an oiled surface. That is more than 100 years ago. What happened during the Depression is that families, farmers, and householders carried forward that already known public health and farmstead practice because they had to stretch every penny and use what was on hand. They were not reading public health journals. They were doing what the county health man or their own parents or the old neighbor down the road had taught them. Drain what can be drained, cover what can be covered, and for the dead water that has to stay, a little oil on the surface to stop the breeding. You are not learning a new method. You are recovering an old one that the spray truck era and the specialty product aisle quietly replaced. The compounding habit here is weekly inspection. The EPA says to empty and change common breeding water sources at least once a week. The University of Georgia says replace bird bath water weekly and pet dish water at least once a week. The University of Missouri says weekly inspection of containers is essential. So here is your rhythm. Tonight, walk the property. This week, dump, cover, clear gutters, flip containers. Every week in warm weather, check again before the 5 to 7 day larval window becomes a hatch. For unavoidable stagnant water, the modern prevention branch is BTI rather than repeated oiling in sensitive spots. Old oil film method for dead, non-drinking stagnant water. BTI for the places you want wildlife compatibility and a cleaner modern label. Weekly walkthroughs either way. That is how the breeding stops and stays stopped. Be honest about what this does. The evidence is strong. Oils and surface films kill larvae and pupae in stagnant water by interfering with surface breathing. That is supported by the CDC, extension offices across the country, WHO standards, and more than a century of public health use. That part is solid. The household version, vegetable oil from the pantry, is plausible as a continuation of the same principle, and my folks did it that way. But I will tell you plainly that current extension guidance specifically says to use light oils designed for mosquito control. So if you keep the kitchen oil angle, and it is cheap and it does work on the same principle, understand that you are using the old household method, not the best current label professional recommendation. I owe you that honesty. Where it fails, it does not solve mosquitoes breeding in places you have not found. It does not kill adults already flying. It is not the right tool for moving water, streams, flowing drainage, anything with current that breaks the film. And it is the wrong tool for wildlife bathing water or anything used for drinking. When to call a professional or your local mosquito abatement program. Widespread drainage issues you cannot fix yourself. Repeated breeding in stormwater structures, disease outbreak situations in your area, or a property surrounded by off-site breeding habitat you do not control. That is beyond the barrel and the bucket. That is where the honest scope earns trust. This is the cheap first thing to do at the source on your own property, not a cure for everything. A word on safety, and I mean this part. Never use used motor oil. Never use gasoline, diesel, or anything improvised from the garage. Some purpose-made mosquito larvicide oil labels warn of skin and eye irritation, inhalation hazard, and flammability. If you use a purpose-made oil, read the label first, wear gloves if called for, and do not fool around near an open flame. For vegetable oil, the hazard is low, but keep it off surfaces where someone could slip, and store it properly so it does not go rancid and attract other problems. The most important safety correction I can make to the way this is taught on the internet is about bird and pet water. I have already said it, but I will say it once more because it matters. No oil in bird baths, pet dishes, livestock bowls, or wildlife water, period. If you want the safe around birds promise, use BTI, that is the honest line. Now I want to take a moment, because here is where it all comes together. Look at what we have walked through. First, you eliminate what you can. Dump, drain, cover, change. That costs nothing and stops most of the breeding. Second, for dead stagnant water you truly cannot eliminate. A thin oil film on the surface suffocates larvae and pupae by cutting off their access to air. The material cost is pennies. The evidence is strong. The practice is more than a century old, and it works on the principle that these creatures must breathe at the surface. Third, for bird baths, pet-adjacent water, and anywhere, wildlife compatibility matters. BTI is the safer, modern, label-backed tool. About $9.87 for a six-pack that lasts months. The whole approach is source control first, narrow treatment second, and the right tool for the right water. The honest math is plain. Put it on the pad. A 48-ounce bottle of vegetable oil, about $4.12. At the tiny amounts needed per treatment, that bottle would last an entire season and then some. The per-treatment cost for a household-size container is effectively pennies. Fractions of a cent for a bucket, maybe a penny or two for a rain barrel. A six-pack of BTI Mosquito dunks for the sensitive spots, $9.87. Call your total material cost for an entire mosquito season under $15, and that is being generous. Line that up against the other side. Professional mosquito control service, $80 to $150 per visit. Most services recommend monthly treatments through the season, that is 4 to 6 visits. Call it $320 on the low end, up to $900 on the high end for a season of chasing adults through the air. The gap is not subtle. $15 at the source versus hundreds chasing the symptom. And the bigger value is what you stop paying for, season after season, once you understand that the problem was never the flying mosquito. The problem was the standing water. There is no money in teaching a family to walk the yard, dump the water, and stop a breeding site with a few cents of material. There is a good deal of money in selling repeated sprays, fogger cans, electric zappers, citronella everything, and service visits after the breeding site has been quietly ignored. That does not mean the products on the shelf are all fake. BTI is real and useful. Some of the sprays work for a few hours, but the profitable habit is adult chasing, because adult chasing is a subscription. Kill the ones flying today, and you need to kill the ones flying tomorrow, and the day after, and the week after. The careful old folks' habit was source control first. Stop the water, stop the nursery, and the next 100 mosquitoes never exist. That is not a conspiracy. It is plainer than that. When something works without you paying for it, nobody has a financial reason to teach it to you. 2 generations got comfortable, stopped walking the yard the way the old folks did, and the knowledge quietly faded. You can be the one who never paid. This was never really about mosquitoes. It is about whether the home depends on buying a new answer every week or on understanding the little systems that cause the problem in the first place. A careful household stops the thing at the barrel, the gutter, and the bucket before it ever becomes a patio full of biting adults. That is self-reliance. That is the way my folks ran a home. It cost almost nothing, and they owed nobody. Here is what I want you to do tonight. Walk the property. Every standing water source gets sorted into 3 piles. Dump it, cover it, or treat it because you truly cannot drain it. Tonight, handle the easy wins, flip the buckets, empty the pots, dump the saucers under the flower pots. This week, clear the gutters, check the downspouts, change the bird bath water and the pet dishes. For that dead, stagnant water that must stay put, apply your thin film, just enough sheen, nothing more, and check it in 24 hours. This weekend, pick up a pack of BTI dunks for the bird bath and any water near pets or wildlife. And from here on out, every week through warm weather, walk the yard again. 5 minutes. That is the whole routine. The 5 to 7 day larval window means weekly is the cadence that keeps you ahead of the hatch. $15 in materials, 5 minutes a week. The mosquitoes stop where they start. I want to hear from you on 2 things. First, what hidden breeding site cost you the most comfort last summer? The gutter, the barrel, the old fountain, the neighbor's tire pile. What was it? And second, what mosquito prevention habit did your father, your grandfather, or your county health man use before the spray trucks and the store aisle took over? If there was an old method in your family, something they did every spring, every summer, the way they kept the yard, share it in the comments. These little inherited methods get lost when nobody writes them down, and I read every single one. If you are not subscribed yet, subscribe. Same principle next time, different enemy, same low-cost prevention. The old cheap way to stop flies or wasps where they begin instead of buying another can. You will want to see that one. Until then, walk the yard tonight. Dump what can be dumped. Cover what can be covered. For the dead water that has to stay, a thin film and a weekly check. Stop the nursery and the mosquitoes never make it to the patio. That is how the careful old folks handled it with nothing but a sharp eye, a little oil, and the sense to stop the problem where it starts. That is how it is still done in any home that remembers.